Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to Stable tonight. I see many new faces who I don't think have been to Stable before, so I'm very pleased to see so many new people. My name is Caitlin Wasenko, and I am the Director of Advancement and Operations at this wonderful organization, this brand new organization. I want to just tell you a little bit about what Stable is. I really want to acknowledge our fabulous partners in bringing this event together, and then we'll get started, because I'm a little biased, but I have been looking forward to this conversation for a while. So Stable is a brand new arts organization. We just opened our doors last June, and it was designed by artists for artists. Our three founders, Tim Dowd, Caitlin Teal Price, who you'll hear from, and Lynn Myers. I don't know where Lynn, right in front of me. About 6 years ago, we're thinking about what the needs of the artists were in DC and how to create a space that artists can not only live in DC, but thrive. And long story short, as a result, we were able to open up Stable. They worked really hard, and they got funds and a space and the renovation and put everything together so that Stable could come to life last June. This is just sort of the tip of the iceberg with Stable. We have, you're in our exhibition space, but we actually have 10,000 square feet of this wonderful building, and there are 30 artists who are working here. Each of the 30 artists was selected by a jury from a pool of over 150. So just to give you an idea, it was very competitive. There's excellent artists. If you are a Stable artist here, you just want to raise your hand. I just want to give you guys a shout out too. Yeah. Our opening exhibition that you're sitting among right now exclusively features Stable's artists. This is the only time that we're going to do this. We'll have rotating exhibitions, but because this is our big coming out party, we wanted to make sure that everybody got to know who all of Stable's artists were. So please enjoy. And then on your seats, you have a wonderful packet. This is our gift to you for coming tonight, and it features an image of each of the works of art here and a little bit about the artist. So I encourage you to come back and be a part of this community. We're really thankful you're here and that you're part of this evening with us tonight. And I want to pass the mic over really quickly so that we can thank some of our incredible partners. The first person I'm going to introduce is Sarah Gromley from UNICEF USA. Sorry.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So first, I just want to say thank you to Eisenhower Fellowship DC chapter and to Pro Fellow for joining together to have this event, and also, of course, to Stable for hosting us in this fantastic space. It's really gorgeous, and for bringing us together to talk about some of the challenges that we all face. So for UNICEF, we work in over 190 countries, and we ensure that children not only survive, but kind of like what you were saying, that the children also thrive so that they have safe and productive childhoods. UNICEF is also incorporating innovative technologies, things like using drones to deliver vaccines to rural communities, or SMS text messaging to track child migration patterns and things like that. So tonight I'm here on behalf of NextGen, which is UNICEF's young professional group. And we're a group of globally minded, passionate young people who use their time and resources to shine a light on UNICEF's work here to U.S. constituents. So throughout the year, we'll plan events to do things that offer us the opportunity to network with like-minded people. We'll have programmatic rich events, in partnership with local organizations, much like tonight. So we would love to talk to you more about that. We actually have a couple of members who are here, if you guys could just raise your hands. And so if any point and Antoine as well, at any point you'd like to talk more about UNICEF's work and how you can get involved in some of these events this year, we would love to talk to you. So please come up and let us know. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sarah. And next, I'd love to welcome Winston Chang, who is the president of the Eisenhower Fellowship DC chapter.
Thank you. And I'll keep this quick because I'm excited to hear from the panelists myself. Eisenhower Fellowships was founded as a gift to President Eisenhower, his first year in presidency. It's a person-to-person exchange, which is really driving the relationships between countries. The vision is that those person-to-person exchanges strengthens and creates world peace, which is a lot of fun. So we have a DC chapter here. We get together and we do a bunch of little events and not so little events. So we're really happy to be a part of this event here with Stable especially. And we just welcome you to meet some of our members, Nagesh over there, Adam's in the back here, and Connect with us if you're ever interested in the fellowship. We send people in the U.S. abroad for about 4 to 6 weeks, and they go visit a bunch of countries, and then we bring in about 50 fellows as well from around the world to do the same thing in the U.S. So thank you very much for having us, and we're proud to be here. Thanks, Caitlin.
Great, okay. So I'm gonna explain a little bit about how this is gonna work. This is kind of a new technique for us, so hopefully it goes well. I'm sure with our incredible panel, it'll be wonderful. So the idea of this was to really kind of emerge from a conversation between myself and my husband, Nagesh Rao, who's standing in the back. And he works a lot in business and startup world, and we have many conversations about this incredible overlap between artists and entrepreneurs. And I think that sometimes these worlds can be really divided. So we sort of came up with this concept of kind of a curated or an observed conversation among artists and entrepreneurs. And I'm gonna present several problems or situations that we feel both groups encounter, and I'm gonna kind of let them talk for 8 minutes about how they have addressed that issue in their experience, how they would recommend other people address the issue. We're gonna give them 8 minutes to talk, and then I'm actually gonna give you an opportunity to give feedback after each one. So what I'm looking for in the conversation is to emerge the differences and the similarities between the different fields. If you want to make an observation about that, if you want to add an additional solution-focused suggestion for all of your peers here tonight, you can do that. Or if you want to ask any of the panelists to clarify. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do that after each question. Okay, so before we get started, we want to know who you are. If you could please just tell us your name and just very, very briefly, something really great that brings you here tonight. A little bit about you.
So starting with me?
Please.
Awesome. Good evening, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here. My name is Marcus Bullock. I'm the CEO and founder of the company Flickshop. We built the technology that helps keep families connected to their incarcerated loved ones. There's no internet or social media inside of these prison facilities around the world. And so we wanted to figure out a way to be able to keep the connection going the same way that we all leverage social media, email, texting out here in the community so that others can have the same relationships that we have with our family members here.
Hi, I'm Emily Francisco. I'm an artist here at Stable. I primarily work with decommissioned instruments and technology and make interactive objects that generate sound.
Like this one. Very cool piece over there. You should play it later. I'm Caitlin Teal Price, a co-founder of Stable and also an artist.
My name is Mark Walsh. I used to work with Nagesh at the Small Business Administration, my only government post, a political appointee. But I'm a venture capitalist here in Washington, D.C., focusing mostly on education, AI and machine learning, content, newspaper content, saving newspapers. I was one of the group that bought the Washington City paper out of bankruptcy. For those of you who enjoy that publication, please keep reading and keep, thank you. That was, we're still losing money, but it was a fun purchase, just for the record. But I'm really excited to be here because I think, frankly, before the conversation on the panel, we had to sort of prepare ourselves for this moment. Before I got the invite, I hadn't really mapped the arc of the life or the journey of an artist against the arc and the journey in the life of an entrepreneur. And now that I've sort of processed a lot of what we're talking about, there are a lot of similarities that I hope we'll get into tonight that I think will be worthwhile for all of us. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay, let's jump into it. So the first topic of conversation is identifying your niche. Entrepreneurs and artists, what is the quote-unquote problem that you're trying to solve? What makes your brand more attractive than others? How did you come to this? How do you sell it? How does this look when what you're solving isn't necessarily so cut and dry? And what are the problems that need solving? Are there problems that are more successful to funders versus what you really want to solve? Anything about identifying your niche in this whole world that you operate in.
Could you repeat the question, please? I'm not sure I got it.
How do you identify your niche?
Well, I guess I've been given the microphone. So I work with things that make sense to me. I work with systems, and for me, making work is a lot about problem solving because I'm presented with objects or items that are either donated or things that I come across that I'm attracted to, but reconfiguring these objects in a way that makes sense to me. And so for me, it's not particularly trying to market and sell the work. It's more what I'm interested in making. And if people pick up on that idea, that's great. Like for me, I just want people to enjoy interacting with my work.
So that's very similar actually to how Stable began. There's similarities and differences. So what we needed to do, what we saw was a problem in DC. I'm blanking, guys. I need a little like.
Well, you're solving a problem here. You're presenting fantastic output from people that are creative in DC, that you're the place where it's happening. So this is the niche geographically, and I wrote execution. I'm gonna answer.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm one of the few that are born and raised out of this city, and to be able to see this happening, and as I was talking earlier about the evolution of DC and seeing these kinds of places being erected around the city, it's incredible. So I was grateful to be able to walk in, and even hearing a little bit about the history from Nagesh about where this building came from. I'm like, oh wow, this is so cool. It's not the DC that I grew up in, and I'm excited to see what the city is turning into.
Yeah, so I actually grew up here too, and having moved away for quite some time, and then
I want to talk to you, sir. I want to talk to you.
having moved away for quite some time, and then moving back in 2010, and not really knowing where to find other artists, and feeling like instead of hightailing it out of here, figuring out how to solve that problem, and so that's kind of where the idea for Stable stemmed from.
So can I hop on that too?
So I got into the internet in 1986, before it was even called the internet. And oddly enough, I actually met President Eisenhower when I was very, very little, so I have a connection to the Eisenhower Fellows that is very, very odd. I was very young, just so you know. And I even raised money for UNICEF in my little milk carton, so you got like $30 from me from the ages of 7 to 9 in nickels and dimes. But the internet, and before it was called the internet, but as a platform, what it tends to do, and what I've always pursued as a niche, sort of my brand niche, I guess, is that it disintermediates buyer and supplier or provider and consumer, so to speak. It disintermediates people that are in the middle of those transactions. So if you think about the travel agent world back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even the early 2000s, you went through a travel agent to book a trip, and now none of us would use a travel agent to find the best flight to Cleveland. You look at selling and buying stock. There used to be stockbrokers who had a guaranteed price for every transaction, and now you can sell and buy stock for effectively nothing, and you can get advice and information about a financial transaction at a rich and deep level unknown to anybody prior to these kinds of marketplaces and information providers erupting. So, and the same is true in education. I spent, as I said, a lot of time in education. You can now get a degree online from great schools that would have poo-pooed it 5, 10, 15 years ago. So this provider-supplier relationship, or provider-consumer relationship, that niche is what I've always pursued. And as a brand, I guess to the exercise of the first question, that gives me opportunities when a new disrupted marketplace emerges. So as a venture capitalist, I am contacted by companies that are trying to start and raise money to do this because they know that I've been to this movie. And I guess the final point I'll make on brand, or sort of how you niche yourself out and your opportunity, what you're trying to create for an opportunity for yourself or pursue, is that you don't have to be first, you don't have to be the best, that often experience and failure in that cycle, that failure is often more educational and more valuable to the players in it than success or zest or energy, because failure is a fantastic tutor. I wish I'd had a little bit less tutoring in that, just so you know, but it's a fantastic tutor, and that is a part of the niche or the brand that I have found of value.
Absolutely love that. I think I embody so many of these points that you're making, including failure, niche, brand. So just to level set a little bit. I'm 38 now, but I went to prison when I was a 15-year-old kid. I carjacked a man at a mall in Springfield. I got sentenced. Tapped on the window with a firearm, asked him to get out. My friend and I was 15, he was 16. We jumped in the car, pulled off, sped off down 95, and the next day we were arrested at Pentagon City Mall. I got sentenced to 23 years to life for that crime. As a 15-year-old kid, and the judge said that, what I'm going to do, Marcus, is I'm going to suspend 15 of those years, but you're going to have to serve 8 of them, and you're going to have to serve 8 years in adult maximum security prisons. And so as a 15-year-old kid, my brain couldn't even process the failure that I was experiencing even in that moment. I actually thought I was going to go home every single day for the first 2 years of that sentence. I lived in complete denial. It wasn't until I met a friend that was in one of the prisons where I was, and I asked him how long he had been in prison, and he had told me he had been in for 31 years, and that is what smacked me in the face and helped me understand that, wait a minute, I'm going to have to do all 8 of these years. Now, fast forward through all of my teenage years, my early 20s that I grew up inside of those prison cells, until I was 23 in 2004 when I was released from prison. And during that time, although it was like the darkest time of my life, and I thought that I was going to die in those cells because I grew up in the maximum security, so all of my best friends had life sentences. And so they were, telling me they're going to die looking at cinder block walls, so I did too. And I thought that I was going to do too. And my mom, she sensed that sense of depression, and she made a promise to me in the prison visiting room and told me that she was going to write me a letter or send me a picture every day from that day forward for 6 remaining years. And she did exactly that, saved my life. And it gave me an opportunity to be able to see the world through her lens that helped prepare me for release when I came home in 2004. A few years later, after a couple of businesses that I started, trying to find a job, entrepreneurship is a great path for people that are coming home from prison and had to check that box that said they were a convicted felon, so I couldn't live in most places. I couldn't get work in most places. So I had to start my own company and buy my own home because that was the only way that I would be able to further advance my levels of success after prison. And that's what prompted me to launch, one of the things that prompted me to launch Flick Shop is because I knew that the only way that I made it out of that dark time was my mom's letters and photos, because mail is everything to people in prison with no internet. And it's interesting because I went to prison in 1996 when AOL was still sending around the disc in the back of the magazines, right? Right? And then I came home and it was like Google. And it was like, wait a minute, right? No more pay phones. I got out there with a beeper on my hip. It was like, I'm dating myself a little bit. But as I think about the solution that we built out of that, now, interestingly enough, since we launched Flick Shop in 2012, we've connected over 166,000 families, shipped over 500,000 postcards, and connected people in ways that we've never dreamt about. And as we think about the niche that we're building and how we're trying to carve out our space in the world, and working to build one of the technology companies that will disrupt that justice system that keeps these people encaged inside a place where it's typically hopeless and filled of despair, we know that it's going to take people like me that are courageous enough to say, yes, I spent a long time in prison, and we're still capable of building these kinds of solutions. And so as we think about niche and brand marketing and how I introduce myself to the world, I think it's interesting to hear you talk about failure as a big component as to why someone will have a silver lining in a dark cloud.
I'm going to pause it right there. I'm sorry, because we're at time. So, yeah.
I'm so sorry. That was I'm so sorry. I completely hijacked the conversation. But I just wanted to give context. I wanted to give context for the conversation. So I'm so sorry to my panelists.
I feel like that we could go on with that conversation too. I want to open it up to the audience in just a couple minutes. If anybody wanted to make an observation, I'm sorry, I don't have a microphone for you, so please feel free to speak nice and loudly. But if you want to make an observation, ask for clarity, or add some other contribution, I will allow that now. So shy. All right, thank you, Nicole.
I think thinking about branding at Halcyon a lot, and we work with both artists and entrepreneurs, and I think something that we definitely try to think very heavily about is this idea, this mythology, this spelling mythology of what people immediately think about when they think about entrepreneur. What they think about when they think about artists. Like when you think of entrepreneurs, like are you imagining someone in a white guy in a hoodie, like developing software in his college dorm room? Well, we really want people to understand that entrepreneurs are all from all ages, all backgrounds, and they're solving issues. They're not necessarily making the next Tinder. They're really, solving some of the world's problems. And we feel the same way about artists. Is that they're not necessarily like people that are holed up in their studios. That they actually care about communities. That they care about bringing the world forward. That they care about using creativity to solve problems. And that I think that what we definitely try to instill across the board with entrepreneurs and artists is this idea that branding, marketing, thinking about yourself as an entrepreneur, about yourself as a business is not dirty, it's not wrong, and once we start to change that mindset, then we can start to think about artists and entrepreneurs along these very same lines in terms of success. That you don't have to be starving, that you don't have to be a certain way or fit a certain mold in order to change the world.
Oh, thanks.
I have a question for Caitlin. When you were thinking about this idea with the other founders as well, how did you test your idea? We hear what you're talking about, you lived it, so you know it, right? But Caitlin, you weren't, you're in a new area. How did you test the idea that this would become a place?
Well, I am from here, so I knew that that this kind of community was missing or sort of kind of falling away. And I also knew that there were artists here because I was one of them. And I've met a couple here and there, but so we didn't really test it. We just kind of knew, and that's actually what I was connecting with you about. And as an entrepreneur myself with this project, and also as an entrepreneur as an artist, things seem to have to come from a personal place no matter what, and I think that's a real connection between the two. And so, yeah, so I don't. It was a gut instinct, and. Not really. That's the artist part, I think, because I'm not trying to go to business school. None of us did. We're all really artists here. And
Although I
just
think
have
you
to
should
follow
talk
our.
about the experience with the first developer.
You love that. Yeah, so we said to talk about the experience with the first developer. Do you want to talk about that experience? This is the 2 minutes for you.
Well, so I was going to add, because Mark, and for the artists too, this is a government city, this is a government town. Yeah. And the joke is Hollywood for, other people, right? That's
For the record, my husband is very handsome, for the record.
But, Mark, how does this city is breaking the trends of not being a gov city only for the artists? Entrepreneurs, you're trying to make this a creativepreneur, soulpreneur, entrepreneurial space. So it's breaking the mindset of what everyone thought TC was, right?
Yeah, look, to me, the map that overlaps with some of the points being made is that entrepreneurship and artistic endeavors are both lonely. You're coming out of you're sort of alone, chasing a vision, chasing a dream. And certainly in entrepreneurial behavior, I know this for sure, the highs are higher and the lows are lower. So the sine wave, the delta, the experience is extraordinarily taxing. And finding mentor groups around your startup, around your artistic endeavor, your pursuit, often really, really helps. And to Nagash's point, Washington, D.C., frankly, up until MCI and AOL, and I used to work at AOL, and I mailed you many of those discs. You weren't getting them. Maybe you were getting them in prison, I don't know. Maybe you couldn't log on. Anyway, there are a few companies, telecom and MCI and internet-oriented stuff in AOL, really broke the mold and turned this arguably into as large an entrepreneurially involved market as Silicon Valley. The amount of dollars in mergers and acquisitions in startups and growth equity in this city is almost, in fact, in some cases, bigger than Silicon Valley, which we all celebrate as the epicenter of guys in hoodies. I guess you were saying guys in hoodies, bros in hoodies, doing this next, stupid act that means nothing to our life. And B, final point is that with government and educational donuts that we have in this area, sometimes companies that have extraordinary products that have impact on our lives, not just
Tinderish fake impact on our lives, get government and social not-for-profit and NGO enthusiasm, funding, and backing early on that would never happen in Valley or never happen in Boston, Chicago, Miami, or New York. So in some ways, what used to be our weakness has flipped, and from a venture capital environment, from my perspective, is actually our strength.
You know, it's interesting you say that because you could substitute every word you said as an entrepreneur with artists, the highs, the lows, all of it. It could absolutely be, it's like right in line.
Global search and replace in a Word document, right? That's how
I think so. I really do think, yeah.
I'm gonna pause it there so we can move on to the next. I feel like each of these we could just keep opening up into a whole new conversation. But the topic of discussion number 2 is all about building your network. Before when I'm finished, Marcus, if you could pass your mic to Emily and I'll give you mine. That way we can keep that flowing because what you guys will have to say will be more important than me. But topic number 2 is building your network. So who are the key people in your network? How do you identify them? How do you know who you need? And what do you do about toxic people?
Let's start with that.
All right, I guess I'll jump in with that one because I've definitely encountered my own levels of toxic people, but I just really try to distance myself and stay professional because I feel like with toxic people, they dig their own grave, and if they pursue a certain type of behavior, it really just sort of comes back at them. And if I try to interact with that, it really brings down what I'm doing. So focus is a really important thing. My brain latched onto that toxic behavior, and I'm forgetting the first part of the question, but building a community. So I moved to DC for graduate school. Actually, Tim was one of my graduate advisors once upon a time. And so I came here specifically because I was living in San Diego. I wasn't particularly happy with what I was doing. I was a commercial printmaker, and I was like printing clothing all day. And while skill-wise it was really interesting, it wasn't fulfilling, and I felt like I was completely distanced from any arts communities out there because it was very much based in like, what school did you go to? It wasn't a California school. So I decided to pick a city, and the day that the shop owners told us to all file for unemployment because it was 2008 and the beginning of the recession and it's a commercial business, I received my AU acceptance package, and I was like, okay, I'm moving to Washington, D.C. And so I came here, and in graduate school, I expected my classmates to be more of the community I was going to be with, but instead my professors were a stronger community for me because they were supportive, and there was a lot of toxic behavior in my graduating class. And so I was really fortunate that I was surrounded by a good group of people that had some great ideas.
So let me hop in real quick with a definition of stealth toxicity, because I think this is something we should all pay more attention to. I mean, toxic people, they usually are self-identified. They're like, oh, that will take it away. But there's a stealth toxicity I would posit to you tonight. I have asked a lot of people for money when I've raised money for companies I'm running, and now I am asked for money by a lot of people that run companies and want me to invest. And in those transactions, those interactions, the worst, the most toxic outcome is when the person says, that's great, let me think about it. And as one of my bosses once said, better a fast no than a long yes, right? And I wish I could retrieve just 10% of the time I've wasted in conversations with people where I'm asking them for something, or now that I'm being asked for something, where the conversation, the interaction, the relationship, frankly, went on way too long, and we each wasted each other's time. And I think that's stealth toxicity that I think sometimes robs us of time, and sometimes money, certainly energy, and I would posit that as something to pay attention to.
Yes, I had a lot of those. Yeah, that's a great idea. Let me know how that works out for you.
Yeah.
Kind of conversations and think. And it was interesting because during those times, and I still have a lot of those times because I'm fundraising now, and I'm pitching it seemingly every day. And when I'm not pitching, I'm still pitching, right? And so during the journey, it was interesting because there was a ton of resentment that came from that stealth toxicity. I'm so tweeting about that later, so you'll see. But there's a ton of resentment there. But interestingly enough, I think that, during the journey, I launched FlickShop in 2012. It took me 3 years just to jump through the bureaucratic red tape. Then another 2 years to think about how to build product market fit for our users to leverage a new evolving tech inside of a space. And then now we're at this growth stage and we're raising cash around it. But during the journey, because there was such a huge knowledge gap. My last grade complete is the 9th grade. Right? There was such a huge knowledge gap that not only did I look for investors to write checks to us, but to be able to fill in some of those gaps where we needed there were clear voids because I just didn't know what I didn't know. And the interesting thing about that is, and the flip side of what you're describing was that the journey, looking back in hindsight, the journey is really what prepared me for moments like today. And had I not had those investors or potential mentors or coaches that were there to kind of sort of inject that toxic moment in my life, it wouldn't have forced me to then go back and figure out how to overcome barriers that are typically erected for entrepreneurs, and I'm sure artists, that most aren't strong enough to be able to fight through. And so one thing I love to inject in the conversation are to invest inside of your social capital in moments of social equity that you're building along the journey, because those are the things that will prepare you for the successes that will come much later, as a part of that journey.
Well, how did you build this? Do you have mentors? And how did you build the team to make this happen?
Yeah, we so the three of us work very well together, and I don't think
Right, I think we're all good, right?
So no, we didn't have any mentors. We arranged meetings with anybody and everybody, and we had conversations, and we were really open with what we knew and what we didn't know, and just kind of continued to build friendships, and picked the pieces of knowledge that we needed and just kept stepping forward. It was one of those things, none of us had done this before. It was completely out of passion and need, and we knew we didn't know what we were doing, but we had the drive to do it. So,
Were there low points?
yeah, but I can't think of what they were.
After the
You.
first developer.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, this is another segue.
So we started working on this project 6 years ago. We were in conversations with the developer over in Ivy City. They promised us a barn on a roof, which is, they sent us a picture in an email, and we were like, yes, of course we want that barn, this beautiful glass barn on a roof. Like, yeah, make that for us. And Tim and I were all like, yeah, we gotta think of a name. And so we thought of Stable, and then they were like, peace, no, never mind, that was a joke. Is that what you wanted me to tell? I don't even know. Yeah, oh, that part. Yeah, so they wanted us to move in for 1 year, and then they'd move us down the road every year as they kind of continued to develop around us. And so they were using us as, a placeholder and to make the neighborhood cool. And,
You were clickbait.
Yeah, totally. And that ultimately was not our mission. So we also walked away from them. So it was a mutual departure from one another, but
But a time waster.
But it was a time waster. It was a total time waster, but we were able to get our mission in place during that time. So it wasn't, so in a way it wasn't a time waster. In fact, it helped move us along to the right place.
And it helped you ethically to not basically be a tool for gentrification.
Well,
Yeah.
totally. And also we know as artists how tricky it is and how hard it is to move your space and your practice. And we don't want to be used like that. And far too often we are. And so that's why we built Stable as a place for artists to be and to come together and to keep making their work and not have to be displaced and all those things that can go on.
To be stable too.
I know, isn't it weird? Yeah. So Stable, even though it was inspired by a glass barn on a roof, it's like has many levels of meaning. Yeah, totally.
Well, it sort of reminds me of my first time here, sort of the WeWork for artists, in that, WeWork, although they've come under a lot of duress recently because they blew $11 billion in market value over like a week. But anyway, WeWork, does anybody here have an office in WeWork or visit WeWork on a regular basis? Yeah. So, are you based in WeWork?
Now I'm in Halcyon. I'm in Halcyon.
Got it.
So I'm so good.
Love Halcyon. It's a little better than we were, just for the
It's
record.
a lot better.
A little bit. A little bit. That glass bar on the roof, and someday you're going to have one of those, I know. But anyway, WeWork had created this sort of communal or common experience where struggling entrepreneurs could look each other in the eye over their morning coffee and go, damn, I made a pitch last week and I thought I had the money, and the guy just, or the woman just called me and said, they're not going to give me the money. So the ups and the highs and the lows are shared, and that sort of moment to share your darkest times and sometimes your triumphs is, I think, a major portion of WeWork or co-working spaces, and it just strikes me there's no one of that going on here.
100%.
I'm going to stop there
Yes.
so that we can give the audience a chance to weigh in.
So I just want to raise a point, maybe it's not a question. There are some severe economics to being an artist. There isn't a lot of income. Nobody knows that. Nobody talks about it. The public doesn't really understand that. People have the term starving artist. That's sort of fantastic. Most of the artists I know in DC, and I know a lot of them, I'm an artist, I also do other things. They do something else to make a living, and they do something else to pay for health insurance, and they do something else to pay for their studio rent. So all of their creative activities get compressed into the sort of windows of time around what they have to do to survive. So how, as a community, are we capable of changing that?
You're changing that?
Changing that for artists.
Well, there's a problem to solve.
Yeah. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm trying to fix that problem. Because I'm also an artist and I've identified that the economics are not there. I come from a brand marketing consumer packaged goods background. So economics was boring what I was doing to build marketing products. And then when I started building and started creating my own art collection, I was using materials that, aligned with my vision as an artist. And it ended up costing me $600 a piece to make. And when I tried to go to market and sell it, I realized that nobody knows me, so I can obviously build a brand. And the perfect way to build a brand is through partnerships, right? And through working with galleries who have an established audience. But those galleries take a 60% commission. So by the end of the day, because I'm a working artist, the most market value I can probably command is probably $1,800 to $2,000 for my artwork. 60% of that is gone to the gallery, and the $600 of that is gone to their costs. They're making $200 for 20 hours of my time, so I'm making less than 15 cents an hour. I agree with you, the economics are out there, but I'm working on a product to solve that. But I'm so interested in hearing this panel's ideas on how to support people and artists who also have this vision.
One thing the internet's really good at is discovery. And I am not an investor, although I think I'm going to become an advisor to, I'm spacing on the name, they just changed their name. It's a platform to sell art by undiscovered artists. And I think there's a few of them out there. You probably know them. I'm still learning this marketplace, but the discovery process has been compressed because of technology and the internet in a way that I think might be of value, because the starving artist typically, that phrase typically was applied to undiscovered artists, or who were discovered after their death, as many of the great artists were. These men and women were not popular until they died. And I do have a short, true story. There was a famous agent in Hollywood named Swifty Lazar, back in the 70s. And Elvis Presley, as you may recall, died in the 70s. And as the story goes, somebody ran into Swifty Lazar's office on Hollywood Boulevard and said they just found Elvis Presley dead on the floor of his bathroom at his house. And Swifty said, without missing a beat, "Great career move." And he meant it, because the Presley estate is now worth more than it ever was during Elvis's life. So to return, though, to the problem, I would toss out one other idea. It's not an idea, it's what you actually do. It's compartmentalization. It sounds like you're an example of compartmentalizing. You do X for revenue and do Y for not revenue. And the compartmentalization of being effective at X to make revenue and stay employed and to keep your passion in the box why, so you get better and better and make more things that please you and hopefully please an audience, that wall is hard to maintain. The best compartmentalizer I ever met was Bill Clinton, who could literally keep, the amazing bad and good stuff that was happening in his day completely separate from each other. But there's no lesson to get good at compartmentalization, but I think it's a skill set that ends up being valuable in a whole bunch of endeavors, and it sounds like art is one of them.
With that, Mark, you need a multifaceted approach because it's a big problem that's complicated. And part of the trick of solving it is going outside the traditional areas that you're looking at for alternative places to potentially sell in. For example, there's a building in Panelists City called the Bartlett that's owned by JPG, and part of the agreement for getting that building built was buying $150,000 for Bartlett from local artists, which a lot of people didn't know. So it's figuring out where your channels are that are potentially undiscovered for your market. And to answer your earlier statement about toxicity from a VC, the thing that you have to do is understand the motivation of the individuals that you're speaking with. Some people may truly just be malicious and say, I just don't want to say no because it makes me feel bad. But there's a reverse incentive for VCs in that by saying no or maybe, you don't shut that door on that deal. And if it materializes a better deal later, you can always hop back in. So you're 100% correct that it can screw with people in a very serious way that are searching for money, but it's up to the person who's searching for money to start gauging the individuals that they're speaking with. Is this somebody who's doing this for this specific reason?
I'm going to stop there. We could keep going with it, but I do want to keep moving. This is so good. I was like, each of these we can keep going with. The problem number 3 is going all in. So how do you know it's time to take that plunge to move from your side hustle and compartmentalizing all the way into a full-time gig? What's your first step? How do you do it? What moves do you make? Do you do it? Mark's shaking his head.
I mean, I'm shaking my head not because I disagree with the question or the topic. I just think it's so situational in nature. I mean, we've just had an experience talking here about, you're not prepared. I don't want to point at Jeff reference you specifically, but I think as an example, not prepared to say, screw revenue and a paycheck and a health plan. I'm going to be a successful artist. That's like, who was the Vasco da Gama, the explorer that when they landed on the shores, he burnt the ship so they could never return to the land that they come from. That's a big analogy in venture capital, by the way. Let's burn the ships. Burn the ships. Let's not go there. Maybe we can burn one ship. But I must admit, and I think we touched on this in our phone call, and then I'm going to shut that up because I'm talking too much, that the saddest entrepreneurs I know are ones who went all in and stayed all in way past their sell-by date, right? That the entity was not working, the idea was not market time, there was not a lot of support for it, but they just had a bee in their bonnet that this was what they were going to do. And some of the worst conversations I've had where companies even I've invested in it's going to go bankrupt, and I have to tell the CEO, you should have had a plan B, because we all need a plan B in life, I think, all the time. And these people are they're bereft because they have burned the ships and they're all in, and they just invested so much of their soul and so much of their time, which is the only asset we have, into this failure. Failure is educational, but sometimes you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them, as what's his name one said. But I think the all-in decision ends up being, last point I said this, I think it becomes sequential, that you need some kind of signal as you get closer and closer to all in, that there's a green light somewhere for you here. Because if you don't see those signs on the way to the full commit, it might be the wrong thing to do.
I'm going to take this opportunity to jump back into what Mary was talking about, because for an artist going all in, if you don't have a cushion or someone to support you, it can be a very dangerous thing. And then the larger system is not set up for artists to make money off of their own work. I believe that, and granted this information is from a couple years ago, there might be more galleries that are compliant, but if anyone's familiar with Wage for Work, the only wage compliant gallery in DC was Transformer, and that means that they adequately pay their artists for the work that they're making. Most other people expect artists to live and breathe recognition, and somehow that will feed your kids and put a roof over your head and pay for your studio materials magically. And so artists can't rely solely on like, and I'm speaking from a personal perspective where I work on projects and work with project budgets and with grants and with like specifically funded projects where if I have a passion project, I usually fund it myself. If that takes off, it doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna sell. I built that instrument in like 2011 and it still is relevant, which is why it still is exhibited, but it's not like I'm making money by building weird machines. I mean, I am to an extent, like I've done public art projects, but it's usually something that comes from a budget. But when it comes down to it, artists aren't making money off their work, galleries are making money, art dealers are, and then when the artist dies, then people are really making money off of their work. So,
but the vast percentage of artists' work is not going to appreciate in a way that when they die, the work is valuable. And I do disagree with your statement that galleries are making money off artists' work. It's typically a shared arrangement with, I know there are exceptions and there are tragic exceptions to that, but the ideal is that the artist makes the work, the gallery shows the work. If there's a buyer out there, everyone succeeds. Everyone shares in the risk equally, and that's, that is what we hope for. Like, we share the risk, but it sounds like it's not.
I'm going to bring you back to the panel because we will have time for our audience. But please continue the conversation.
In terms of all in, I think like as an artist, I've always been all in, and there's no, like I've never really had a backup plan, not a real one. I guess one time I wanted to be a nutritionist, but I never really had but so for artists, whether or not you're making money, you have to be all in. Like, that's gotta be what you really love to do if you want to go somewhere with your work. I mean, money or no money.
I agree.
It's not about that for artists.
I'm 100% all in. One of the things I've learned is that the pivot became such a bad word for entrepreneurs. It's like you got to burn the ships, right? But what I've learned along my journey was that the pivot became a part of our strategy. So it wasn't that I wasn't all in on the company that we were building, but a part of the strategy, we had to deviate from one part of our product line because we weren't generating revenue there. And the key indicator for success in the business is that generate revenue. Right? And so when we knew we weren't meeting those milestones, we're like, you know what? Well, maybe this product line, we shouldn't pay as much attention to it as this one that's generating revenue. And let's go deep diving in there. It wouldn't mean like, hey, let's just throw away the company and go like start selling exit signs, right? We were like, no, how are we strategically thinking about building a business where most companies have to do that. Most companies have to think about, whether or not you're going to be Maytag and going to continue to sell refrigerators, or saying, ovens and microwaves and dishwashers are going to be our driving sales during the season. So let's spend more time building out the technologies there. Well, we'll continue to sell refrigerators on this side. So I believe, I'm all in. I don't have a plan B. Flick Shop is it. You know what the plan B is? Exit Flick Shop and then start something else, right? Successfully exit Flick Shop, right? Wherever we a bunch of people make money and then we go do something else. But I'm 100% all in. But I think that the pivot isn't a bad word, right? How we pivot in our strategy, I think, becomes a
And as artists, you have to be nimble also. Pivot and nimble to me kind of are the same thing. And there are a lot of alignments in what you just said, except for, I don't know, I guess I'm just going to re-say what I already said, is that it's not, for many, many artists, it's not about the money when you say you're all in. It's rarely about the money because you're not going to make much.
And I think with artists, the big difference is if you have a day job, that doesn't mean you're not all in.
Right, exactly. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. Yeah, right. All in can be part-time.
All in can be my every waking hour, and whenever I get up in the middle of the night and my kid's sleeping and I can duct some tape breaks and then like get back to sleeping before my day job. Yes.
Yeah, so that's funny because I think there's to me, the phrase that might be different than all in and meant to some extent is all consuming. Because you can be all in, you guys are saying it, you can be all in, but not literally all in. You're all in for what you want to do, but you have other activities that support your ability to stay alive, have a healthcare, and do that. All consuming, I guess, to your point, you're talking about pivot and stuff, but I agree. You got to pivot. Everybody has to pivot. God knows AOL pivoted. You know, AOL started as like homework and recipes and all this goofy stuff online. And of course, we found out relatively quickly it was chat rooms and other stuff that people want to do interactively. As I famously told Steve Case, you had the greatest company ever because you're solving two problems, loneliness and boredom. And last time I checked, the world has never had less loneliness and boredom. It's always growing loneliness and boredom. And he was sort of, AOL was sort of solving it. But the idea of all in versus all consuming, I think, is an interesting line to draw because, to me, in return to that point I made, the saddest companies I see is when it's all consuming, when it doesn't work out. There's going to be no exit, and they know it, and they kind of blew it.
That's a good stopping point. I'm going to open up to the audience.
That's just the distinction between a craft that you're pursuing and a business that you're building. In terms of the vocabulary for this, I think. Because if someone's pursuing their craft long term, it's not in or out. If you're building a business, that's like building an object. There might be a greater relationship between a season or a project for an artist and a business. Where an artist takes on an identity that's probably lifelong and a craft that's lifelong, and a business does not have that kind of necessary.
Go ahead.
In terms of going all in and artist versus entrepreneur, for me, it's about being all in about learning, about being a student. Because I've been on both sides, both an artist in the hardcore sense, and I've been an entrepreneur as well. So there's an intersection of constant this conversation over there. But the thing that's always been constant is whether I'm in one or the other, or both simultaneously, if I'm not learning, then really it's all or not. Because there's something you might be able to learn within that big organization that you can learn that, oh, I can apply that to my entrepreneurial or artistic endeavor. So for me, it's like, whether I'm doing one or the other, all in, all out, what have you, and every moment of the day, if I'm learning, that's going to allow me to continue to be able to move forward. Because if I'm not learning, how do I network better? How do I craft better? How do I draw my scope? Build the app better? Learning, then you can't progress to get to that place you're trying to go. So for me, that's a big part of being involved in constantly in ideas, space of learning. And if that's not present, then everything else kind of doesn't allow you to sort of get from point A to point B and all the things. I agree.
So a couple different times tonight, it's come up this idea of embracing failure so you can learn, pivoting your strategy. But I think that especially for artists and entrepreneurs who are starting out, the cost of failure can be really high, especially when you compare that to a well-established artist who has a lineup of galleries or a company that has billions of dollars of revenue, so if they fail, whatever. So my question, I guess, is just how do you approach failure in a way that's going to still be beneficial?
Can I jump in on this one?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm so blessed to be able to have this opportunity to be able to lead up a company that has this much social impact. Full stop. Because of that, I feel, failure for that, the lessons that I have to learn and all that I have to go through in order to be able to get from 0 to 1 is a part of the benefit of me having this opportunity to be able to do this. Because I could clearly go work somewhere else, and go collect a check and, sustain, bill for my family, and I don't have to have some of the same pressures that I put myself under when I made the choice to be able to do that, right? And I don't know how artists feel, they feel the same way, but because I wake up every morning and I'm like, you know what, Marcus, you made this choice. No one came to my door and hit me with a bat in my head and said, you have to run up this company and you have to figure out a way to be able to raise money, to be able to hire people, to generate revenue, to solve a problem, right? I chose that because I'm opting in. Everything that comes along with that, I tell myself like, look, bro, you can stop today if you want. You know what I mean? Like, go on Indeed. It's a lot of options there, right? But no, I choose not to go on Indeed. So you know what I do? I open my laptop back up and I go reply to some of those emails that I don't want to answer at midnight. And I have to go knock on some of those VC doors, and I'm like, you know what? I mean, I had to learn how to raise money, right? I mean, we talk about the people wanting to keep their doors open, the VCs want to keep the doors open, right? Like, I was banging on doors, pitching to VCs or pitching to funds or even angel investors I first had to learn the difference between angel investors and VCs. And then I'm like, oh, you only invest in healthcare products? Well, you could have told me this 5 minutes instead of me. You know what I mean? Right? And then I had to learn, like, there's certain kinds of social impact investors versus investors that only invest in drone technology. Those lessons, it cost me 3 months of my life and trying to figure out how to pay my mortgage during that 3 months. But hey, you opted to do this, Marcus. So I feel like I have an opportunity. I'm blessed to have the opportunity. And so that's how mentally, I have to tell myself that over and over again in order to keep my sanity. Because mental health is a thing that we don't talk about a lot, especially for entrepreneurs.
Change your perspective.
Yeah.
Any of our other panelists want to?
Just a quick one. Security has a price, right? So to be secure, and I think what you were, at least what I thought you were referencing with hit me, was entrepreneurship versus intrapreneurship. And I speak a lot at business schools, and I tell newly minted MBAs that sometimes it's better to go intrapreneurship, i.e. work at a big company and have a startup mentality inside a big company. That's what I did at Time Inc. I did it at General Electric. And you can often learn a lot of how you will be able to succeed as an entrepreneur by building a startup-y thing inside a bigger company. Now, the risk-reward ratio is a lot different. And famously, one of my employees at GE said to me, here's the problem with GE. If you start up an idea and it's good for the company and it's right for what GE strategy is and it fails, you're fired. If you start up an entity in GE and it's right for the company, it's on a strategy and it works, you get a plaque, right? So the risk-reward ratio, but that's the price of security. So I often tell, just to your point, MBAs or other folks that are thinking, maybe try the big company first, and you might find you don't like that you like the security, the stability, the environment of having employees and revenue and all that. Nothing wrong with that, but that's one way to test it.
Thank you. I'm going to stop there. Let's do another one. Maybe one more. If you guys are up for 2 more, we can do 2 more, but I want to be respectful.
Let's do 10 more. Come on.
10 more. Actually, I want to transition to this one because something was brought up about, Marcus, you mentioned mental health and getting through that. And one of the problems is what happens when you're stuck in a rut. So you feel that you've reached a certain level, maybe you've plateaued, your brand isn't advancing as fast as it was, you feel you've exhausted every angle. So what happens next? Caitlin's laughing. Is this time for the first developer?
I just imagine myself on the floor. Just like, that's what happens. You just, I don't know. It's probably different for, I don't know. I don't know what it's like for everybody else, but for me, I just have to push past it and keep working and be sloppy and make mistakes and do something that didn't work and just keep don't be discouraged by that, and don't let the rut stop you. Showing up every day, even if it's just to sharpen pencils or do whatever, some mundane task. I don't think stopping is the way to get out of a rut.
And just sort of segueing from what Caitlin's saying, that for as an artist, I feel like that really is the ultimate failure, is if you just stop making and lose motivation. And for me personally, and I won't go too off the deep end with this, but my world kind of gloriously exploded over the course of 2 years, where I was chronically ill, required multiple surgeries, didn't have insurance. I was using my grant application skills to apply for biopsies. And so it got really crazy, and then when I thought I was getting out of it, my studio burned down. And so it was glorious failure, but I think for me, Stable has been a new beginning, and it's been an opportunity to start trying to rebuild and start trying to pick up the pieces. And even though I kind of lost 2 years there, it's the fact that I'm still going, I think is really important, because my rut lasted for 2 years, but I'm still going to my studio, I'm still making work, and as long as I'm making work, I think that in its own way is successful.
You know, I think it's often said, but I'm a quick example. You guys have fantastic stories coming past. But at the age of 40, I was CEO of a venture capital-backed company. We ran out of money. I had to fire everybody, staff of about 30 people, including a husband and wife. Talking about no plan B. Same day. The husband was like 6'3" and pissed off. So we fired him first, so he wouldn't know that his wife was about to get terminated. And I'm not making a joke about that. It sounds funny now, but it wasn't at the time, as I know. But I then met with the venture capitalists who had the money in our company, and they said, you know, I said, we're going to wrap it up, and we're, you know, it's over. He goes to this VC with a, you know, $2,000 suit. I was in Chicago. I was commuting to Chicago to run this company. I was living in New York at the time, and he's like, he goes, you know, this, you know, it didn't work. We'll just sell it for whatever we can get, and we'll just go on with the rest of our lives. And I said, this is my life. You know, you're going back to your nice office as a VC. This is my all-in moment, right? I had burned the ships, and I was just bereft. I flew back to New York, and to the point of this, I had and still have a very supportive spouse. So whatever that person in your life, I think there are moments when there's a person in your life that literally saves your life. And that was it, because I was just I had nothing in the tank. And I joined a big company, and I became head of new business development and product in a big company. I went in security, because I was just torched by that experience. And I think everybody that chases these paths has some moments like that. And I think there's always, hopefully, a person, not Wood, your mom, a person that takes you out of it.
That's it?
I'm spoiled by let me tell you the one benefit about going to prison as a 15-year-old, everything is up.
Yeah.
If this is my biggest problem in my life right now, I'm like,
Were there any moments at Stable stalled and you worried maybe this won't happen?
No. And that's why it happened. I mean, I don't know. Like, sure. There was a time when actually we were bidding on this building with somebody who was he was a developer who was going to buy the building and basically throw us the keys. But he got outbid by another developer who ended up buying the building. And at that point, I was pretty discouraged because we got outbid and didn't get this beautiful building. But then 2 weeks later, we got contacted by the people who bought this building, and they offered us 10,000 square feet of this space, and here it is. And so while that was a low moment, it didn't last very long, and I know that none of us lost hope in it, and so that's the one thing that comes to mind. Any others?
I think we're actually the first developer.
I need to hear from your perspective.
Well, that's true. We took a little bit of a break.
So we met every Friday for 4 years, and we just met every Friday. We worked on our business plan, we worked on our bylaws, we worked on all these things believing this would happen. And then we were offered to a slot on the State of the Arts panel. And so we just talked about our idea. And we talked about it to about 300 people who are maybe natives in South Florida. And that brought us our third partner. And then we got an additional kind of momentum. So we had another third of, because we have a lot of resources, we have another third of the and that third,
I mean, I also just think that no one person has every skill that's needed to build something so much larger than themselves. And we just have this special sauce where we fill each other's gaps. And that's a big, I personally think that's a big part of the reason that this happened. In addition to that Washington really wanted to see it happen, and that every single person we talked to cheered us on and supported us, whether it was financially or just by saying, go.
I also think there's an important distinction that we should talk about within the context of this conversation.
Tim, you could be on the panel next time.
Not every artist is an artist because they want to engage in commerce. That's not simply what an artist does. I mean, we have a larger role than simply, I never thought about selling work. That's not why I decided to be an artist. I think that's important to inject in this conversation.
Well, I think that's what I was trying to say before.
If it's okay, I might use this as an opportunity to open up to the audience then for final reflection on anything you've heard.
Yeah, I just have a question. I think I've been in conversation with a lot of people in my own life about what it means to, like, you know, we're talking about ruts and to rest and to practice. And as we talk about like monetizing what we're doing, whether it be our art or our business, I'm just curious from each of you personally what it's looked like in your own lives to just practice, what practice looks like, whether that is a restful practice or that's like working towards this monetization of something or this growing of passion. Because I think it looks different for everybody.
So practice to get good at something you want to get good at?
Interpret it as you will. I think for artists it looks one way. I think for entrepreneurs, I don't know that we talk about that very often, what it means to practice what you're trying to do. So I'm just curious.
I'll start. I mean, so much of my career has been in basically public speaking, addressing a group of potential investors, addressing a group of employees or teammates, or on a panel or a keynote speaker, a lot of public interaction. And I was lucky in that right out of college, I was hired to be the anchorman at a CBS television affiliate in West Virginia. And I was the youngest anchorman in America. And we didn't have a teleprompter. I had to rip the story off the machine, the UPI machine. UPI dates me. And then I would read it and look up at the camera, so I'd get a bunch of words from my brain, look up, and say them into the camera with deep emotion and feeling, not knowing at all what I was talking about. So the idea of not knowing what you're talking about, but looking like you do know what you're talking about, frankly, is a skill set that a lot of entrepreneurs and even people in venture capital have to get good at. So I got a lot of practice at that because this was live television, although nobody was watching because of West Virginia, but live television. And that practice, which to this day, I give a lot of free advice to people I know about public speaking and how to feel good about it, because it's very fearful to a lot of people. Jerry Seinfeld famously said, and apparently he's right, that more people are afraid of death than they are of speaking in public, so that at a funeral, they'd rather be the corpse than the person giving the eulogy. Interesting analogy. And I think that practice I have found, I return to that a lot, because if you can't communicate your idea verbally or in good writing to people that are going to support it, you're toast.
Any other?
Wait, do we have any other practice answers, or is that it? I don't want to give you
Well, I think I have an idea what some of the answers might be, but this is a great mix of people to have here. What events or people have inspired you through bleak times, uncharted times? Say.
Jay-Z.
In what way?
I grew up in Northeast DC off of Division Avenue, and all of my best friends sold drugs. That's what I saw. They drove Mercedes. My mom worked for government, and she drove an Escort. I wanted to be like them and not her. And so I aspired to be like them. When I went to prison, I was introduced to Jay-Z, and he used verses like, I spend Japan yen at 10 major events. It forced me to have to ask questions about what in the world is Japanese yen, and how does he know to talk about this? And it introduced me to a different world of saying, wait a minute, even coming from some of the neighborhoods like the ones I came from, you can get to a place in your career where you have an opportunity to be able to flip it into something more major. And I wanted to figure out a way to be able to make that kind of crossover from what I grew up knowing into what now I could see. You can't be what you can't see. And he was one of the first to give me a vision of what was possible.
It's a good response.
Repeat the question. What gets me through a hard time?
What person,
who inspires?
What person or event really inspired you?
Just in general?
In general, yeah. It doesn't have to be about the business, but in life.
In life. Mostly, you know, the people that I'm around, the people I surround myself with. Usually,
Yes.
I mean, what my experiences are, where I am in my life. It seems simple, but that's
No,
the truth.
it's pretty
Yeah.
profound. It's pretty profound.
Yeah.
I've had a few executives in the business world
Right.
that have been very, very important to me. I'm not a big user of the word mentor. I don't find that to map against but I just found them incredibly educational in how they behaved, men and women, in triumph and tragedy, triumph and failure. But I would think the most important person is my spouse. I've been married 36 years. And I think that's I'm stupendously lucky. She's not, because she married me.
A lot of happiness depends on who your partner is.
All right, I think that Daniel's prompting me to answer this, but
You don't have to.
I don't think I'm not much of a, like, these are my artist heroes. Like, there are people that inspire me, and there are people that work
Not
it.
ours, but it could be anyone.
Yeah,
Kids.
but I think that people who, generally speaking, people who are capable of using art to create something greater than themselves, for me, that's the most inspiring. Like, when I was in graduate school, we met Esther Gates, and he particularly is someone who uses art's funding to build his community, and being able to take something that's set up for a specific purpose and then expand that in the way that he has, like, it's very humbling and very inspiring. So I guess to an extent I have artist heroes. It's the opposite of what I started this statement.
No, I think that's a really nice question to end the panel on. So thank you very, very much to our panelists. I want to give a few shout outs. First of all, Peter Gonzalez in the back, who has been filming this. Yeah, heads up. If you're looking to hire anybody to film any of your programming, I highly recommend him. He's been really wonderful. Gigi, standing next to him, he's here on the weekend, so if you ever want to come back and just explore the exhibition, he's your man who will be your guide. He helps me in so many other ways. Mackenzie Spriggs, who checked us in, she does a lot of work behind the scenes that you don't even know about and that I don't even know about, because she just makes things happen for me in many ways. So thank you very, very much. I do want to acknowledge Nancy Hirschbein. She is one of our newest members of our board of directors, and we are such a lean team here, and I cannot say enough great things about our board. I've never experienced a board that puts as much time and energy and resources into an organization, so I think it's definitely worth acknowledging that she's here tonight. And a final thank you to all of you, because I know this event was ticketed, and many of our events are usually a $5 suggested donation, but this is something that we did that's a little bit different, and so I greatly, greatly appreciate that you reached into your pockets to support this. We are a nonprofit. We do offer artists, they pay only for the square footage in their studio, and just kind of as a reference, I make about $5,000 a month in fundraising just to keep the lights on here. So we try to make it as affordable as possible to our artists, and you being here tonight really, really helps with that. So thank you so very, very much. I truly mean it. If you enjoyed your experience here tonight, please come back and see us again. We have a ton of programming. You can check it out on our website. You can follow us at Stable Arts. Tag us, we'll follow you back. We'll give you some love too. We really appreciate it. So thank you all and enjoy your evening.
Yep.